Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here. It is time for the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. It is Tuesday, the 5th day of October 2021. We have a little bit to talk about and a little bit less to talk about today now that we don't have Sam around. No longer a tropical system. It's way up in the North Atlantic, interacting with the westerlies and all of the energy of the northern latitudes. And so we don't have any trackable features per se in the Atlantic basin for the first time in a long time. Real quick flashback, a year ago, we were tracking Gamma and Delta. Both of those would go on to become impactful systems. Of course, Delta eventually made landfall in Louisiana around the 10th of the month a year ago, and a couple weeks later or so, it would be about 20 days later roughly, we had Zeta that made landfall in Louisiana. And then, of course, we had Eta and Iota in November that were big impact systems down in the Caribbean, and Eta impacted Florida. Busy season last year. This year doesn't look like it's going to be the same in terms of overall intense storms in October, November. That being said, I still think there's room and time left on the clock for a couple of more systems to develop, and I'll show you that and my thinking behind that as we move forward. All right, first of all, a stop at the National Hurricane Center homepage. Just one area out here in the southwest Atlantic, a large area of cloudiness, showers, and thunderstorms associated with this surface trough. Just a large area of inclement weather is a good way to describe it. 10% chance it develops more. Computer models are just kind of meh, that word M-E-H, meh on it, right? Not very much enthusiasm for this to develop in the long term. And if you look at the satellite animation here, courtesy of Tropical Tidbits, it's a little bit better organized today, almost has a little bit of a comma shape to it, but the strong upper level winds cutting across it will help to preclude any significant development. There's a little bit more vorticity associated with it as well. I can show you that real quick, as noted here on the vorticity map from this afternoon. That's the area in question right there. It's still pretty linear, kind of stretched out there with a little bit more concentration on the southwest side of the vorticity region. And that would correlate basically to somewhere down in this vicinity. But overall, very disorganized, strong upper level winds, preventing this from really getting better situated to develop further. Interesting upper level low pressure area over parts of the deep south, bringing a lot of rain and cloudiness and showers and just yucky weather to a good part of the southeast United States. And this is also helping to bring inclement weather over the Gulf of Mexico. That'll help to bring water temperatures down. This time of year, any type of agitation that you get in the Gulf of Mexico will help to stir that up. The sun angle is getting lower in the sky each day, so there's not as much incoming solar radiation. We call that insolation. There's not much of that happening right now. And, well, there is, but it's not like it was in July and August, for examples. So any disturbance that you see over the Gulf will help to mix things up. And those water temperatures just aren't going to be able to rebound very much from that. So you don't even need a tropical system to start really helping to knock those temperatures down. And maybe, just maybe, we don't have to worry about anything else in the Gulf of Mexico for the rest of 2021. I don't know that for sure, obviously, but these types of situations kind of help because it brings that ocean heat content down, again, just from the very fact that this is there. And it's creating some inclement weather for the oil interest and any other shipping interests. Non-tropical in nature, though, this system here with the low pressure area sitting over the deep south, as I mentioned. We'll watch this feature. This is a tropical wave that's moving along, kind of innocuous at the moment, meaning that it is not very threatening, right? It doesn't look very well organized, but this energy is going to make its way over to the west, and it might try to develop somewhere in this area over the coming days. I'll show you that in just a little bit on the GFS. Elsewhere, that's pretty much it in the tropics, and just not much happening. This is the sort of large storm system related to what's left over of Sam and its energy, that warm core tropical energy that came off Africa and went all the way up here, now sitting up in the North Atlantic, merging with all that energy in the higher latitudes. Pretty fascinating stuff. We've talked about Sam enough. That'll be that. Strong upper level winds now over the eastern Atlantic. No more development out this way, probably. I would say I'm 90% sure of that. Going forward, we'll have to wait until 2022, more than likely, before we see anything out in this region of the Atlantic Basin develop. that time has come and gone. But we did have Larry, we had Sam. Those were some pretty interesting long track systems for sure. All right, so back to the vorticity chart just real quick again. There's the system in the southwest Atlantic. And there's that impulse over the deep south, part of that energy extending down into the Gulf. Sometimes these can focus the energy and develop, but that's more along a front. And this is not really that kind of a setup. We have a large stalled front that sits down over the region. This is a smaller feature, and most of the energy associated with it is sitting up over land, so I'm not too concerned about that. Boy, look at this, how that shows up almost like white hot. That's not what it is. It doesn't represent heat. In this case, it's representing the amount of energy and low-level vorticity or spin, and we're talking at the top of the scale here, a huge, huge ocean storm associated again with the remnants of Sam and just other mid-latitude energy. Now, again, down in the Caribbean, I'm sorry, not Caribbean, not yet, down in the main development region, that's what I'm trying to say. We've got to watch this area. Other little pieces of energy down here, they, again, look pretty benign now, but they don't just go away, and they end up going somewhere. Maybe it heads into this area, tries to develop up here. Some of these pieces can get over and eventually develop in the Caribbean, and some of these pieces end up developing in the Eastern Pacific. And I'll show you some examples of that coming up here in just a moment. Real quick scan of sea surface temperatures. Again, the northern Gulf gradually cooling down here, the shelf waters especially. Remember, the water closer to the coast up here is shallower, so it's easier for it to cool off. It warms up fast, cools off fast as well. The water out in the open Gulf much deeper, and it's warmer to a depth of several hundred meters in some cases, so it takes a little bit longer for this to cool off. And, you know, yes, the Gulf is still technically viable if we were to have a disturbance in there, or a hurricane if that were to come along. The thing is, I don't see anything coming, so we don't have to worry about it for right now. Along the mid-Atlantic and the east coast of the U.S., off of Wrightsville Beach, just as an example, again, this is near where I live, water temperatures cooling down in the upper 70s now Fahrenheit. If you go out into the Gulf Stream, a little bit warmer. You know, you get your boat, you head out there, 80, 81, 82 degrees, common out in the open ocean, but gradually temperatures coming down. The thing is, though, it's interesting, we're in fall. I mean, it's October 5th, for goodness sakes, and we have, we've had a couple cold fronts come through, but no big pushes of this, what we call cold air advection. I talked about this, I think it was yesterday, I don't know. I'm pretty sure I did mention it, though, and that's that horizontal movement of air when it's cold and dense, and it just gets kind of pushed in really hard behind a strong surge of Arctic air. Not too much Arctic air this time of the year, but Canadian air that comes down out of Canada, hence why it's called Canadian air, but it's denser, it's thicker, and it just kind of spreads out like a very thick molasses would do on a tabletop, for example. And that lateral movement, the wind behind it, all that pushing of the air, helps to stir things up and really cool off the sea surface temperatures. Well, we really haven't had much of that. It's just been this gradual downturn in ocean temperatures, which is good. I mean, if people still like to go to the beach, it's not too bad, especially south and west of the Cape Hatteras area, right about here. North and east of there, though, along the Jersey Shore up through New England, a little too chilly for my liking, maybe if you had a wetsuit. And, of course, the Gulf of Maine and up towards Newfoundland, Nova Scotia. Newfoundland's over here. But they're included, too, in the cold water areas. Forget about it. Not happening. Not for me, anyway. All right, anomalies. This continues to just astound me. The difference here, the contrast between the very warm Atlantic, we'll put a big old plus in here because this is on the plus side, anomalously warm, and then a big old negative sign or minus sign over here, strongly negative in the equatorial Pacific. And I think, again, it just makes sense that this imbalance will eventually lead to more development in the Atlantic basin. There's a lot of energy here, a lot of upward motion still waiting. Well, right now we're kind of in this suppressed phase, but the overall tendency is for lower sea level pressures, and eventually once the upper levels do cooperate, and there is more upward motion where in the upper levels the air isn't coming down and squashing that rising motion that's happening at the surface, once everything lines up, I think we'll still get 2 or 3 more named storms. The logic dictates it. Now that's not the same as, oh, it's going to happen. There's no guarantees in weather until it's actually happening. You know that, right? That's just the way it works. When it's 100%, that means it is raining or it is snowing or there is a hurricane on top of you. Until then, it's all just probabilistic. But this is very warm relative to average, much colder relative to average, and I think it's just a matter of the Madden-Julian oscillation giving us a little bit of an assist, and I think things will perk up again, and I'll show you that over on this tab right here. We're getting there. Just a couple more before we do that. First, the GFS at the 850 level, 850 millibars. And just to remind you, this is the same level of the atmosphere that this is. This is an analysis taken from satellites. This is a forecast based on analysis from satellites, from upper air soundings, and all kinds of other data that get put into these numerical weather prediction models, NWP, and boom, you get these outputs that look nice on sites like Tropical Tidbits. So what are we looking at over the next few days? Well, let's run through it, and we'll look at 24 hours at a time. So tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning, there's that little surface trough that's currently out in the southwest Atlantic. No big deal, really. It's still not developing much. Some energy, again, sitting over the deep south and extending down into the Gulf, but nothing focused. Anytime you see everything stretched out like this over a large area, that's not focusing. That's not bundling the energy. And so, yes, it could be stormy, but that's not what you get, what you look for if you're trying to figure out where a tropical cyclone may develop. So let's move this out another 24 hours to 48. And not much still. Just a couple of hints, though, of things to come. Kind of a sharp feature there, that little wave axis moving up off the Carolina coast. So a little stormy in the vicinity of Cape Fear, Cape Lookout, and off the South Carolina coast. Mariners out that way certainly will want to be aware of that. And then down here is that tropical wave coming through. That's a piece of energy, and that's what you need to understand. These features represent seedlings. These are pieces of energy out there that are going to try. The atmospheric process is taking place. They're trying to reach their maximum potential intensity, which in some cases is Category 5. But there's limiting factors. You understand? The base state is there right now to support very intense hurricanes from an ocean energy perspective, but that's just one ingredient. The rest of the ingredients, upper level winds, dry air, mid-level air that's not particularly humid, etc., sinking air in the mid to upper levels, lots of things against these things reaching their MPI, their maximum potential intensities, but these are the seedlings nevertheless, so we have to keep an eye on them. All right, so that's again day 2. Let's just go out a little bit more to day 3. And again, not much to hang your hat on. Pretty much a straight shot of easterly winds coming through the Caribbean here. That one impulse just kind of goes away, another one trailing behind it. This is trying to focus a little bit by day 3 off the Carolina coast, but certainly nothing to worry about. There, 78 hours to 84. I mean, it has the spiral bands and the vorticity signature, no doubt, and a counterclockwise wind flow. If I take my telestration away, you can see it better. Yeah, that'll be interesting. It's right off of Cape Fear. We'll see what that looks like in about 90 hours to 96, and that actually closes off a height line in there. So, that might get bumped up by day 4, maybe 30% or 40%. Remember, that warm Gulf Stream does run right under there, and the water temperatures there are easily in the low 80s with plenty of heat content. So, maybe, who knows? We'll see. It certainly doesn't look impressive on the GFS, but that's also not the same as there's nothing there. All right, speaking also of, well, there is a little something there. This, again, another piece of energy coming in. They're not developing out in the open main development region, so we got to watch and see where do they try to come together. And by day 5, well, again, this starts to raise some eyebrows just a little bit more. That's 5 days out. And the GFS just won't let go of that notion that something tries to get going there. This piece fades away, but another one's coming in. All this energy piling in to the eastern Caribbean, which, by the way, some of it could bring some rather inclement weather to the islands down there, the Lesser Antilles, so Barbados, down to maybe Trinidad, Tobago, Grenada, up to Guadeloupe, and eventually the islands of the Northeast Caribbean, Barbuda, St. Bart's, all the way over to Puerto Rico, and many points in between. These little disturbances that come through, each of them are like darts, and one of them is eventually going to pop the balloon, at least you would think. That is a lot of energy piling in there. This is day 5, and you also notice that should pop up and stick out, right? Well-developed tropical cyclone in the southeastern Pacific, and as the expression goes, I would be remiss, whatever that means, if I didn't show you, nope, it's not on the 48, but it is on the 120, and for good reason, because look, the GFS, among others, is showing development by hour 120, so that makes plenty of sense out there. Kind of late in the year, more of an El Nino type development, but again, let's jump around a little bit, go back to the anomalies map. Water temperatures in the southeastern Pacific, away from the Nino area, the ENSO region down here, away from the equator, the water temperatures, which is ironic, isn't it? The water temperatures are warmer, and anomalously so. So above normal up here off the coast of Central America, and more importantly, which is where I should have drawn it, south of southern Mexico, definitely warmer than average. So it's not surprising that we see this, and the GFS is showing this. And then just real quick, by day 6, we'll scooch this on out, and then day 7, that system approaches. That looks like a very well-developed hurricane there in the model. That starts to approach Mexico over here, so we got to watch that. We haven't had a major problem from any tropical systems in that part of Mexico in quite some time, certainly not this year. So we got to watch this very closely here. This is just a week out, so we will be focusing on this quite a lot over the next few days. And of course, this again, all that energy trying to pile into the Caribbean or vicinity, something's going to give. That's my impression here. This just keeps happening, run after run, in one iteration or another, one form or another. Something tries to develop there. We go back, and you can just see at the very beginning here, all these pieces of energy that pile into that region. Finally, something takes shape there by around day 6, and then day 7. So we'll keep an eye on it. That system that I keep talking about here off the Carolina coast, pretty innocuous overall. It doesn't look too threatening, but again, we're talking about 6 days out here, and it does try to get a little energized there. Other pieces of competing energy around it, though, make me suspect as to what exactly is going to happen. But, at the end of the day, with not much going on, there's a lot going on. Isn't that kind of weird? We don't have a named storm, but there's plenty of areas to watch, plenty of sort of pieces of the puzzle to see how they fit together going forward. Real quick, just switching the perspective over to the Eastern Pacific, I want you to keep your eyes on this corridor right through here as that energy comes through that was outlooked on the Hurricane Center's map there, comes together out of the Caribbean. You see it right there, Southwest Caribbean. Probably should have just said Caribbean instead of Caribbean, and I wouldn't have fumbled it. But nevertheless, there it is. It comes together, and yeah, by day 7, making landfall not too far from Manzanillo, if I had to guess. Puerto Vallarta is right up here, and Manzanillo is down here, I do believe. I try to know my Mexican geography, so we're going to have to watch that very, very carefully. And for all of you on the YouTubes there, I don't often say, share my videos, because that's just not how I roll, but start telling people about this. I know I'm not speaking any Spanish at all, and that might not be helpful, but maybe there's translator or whatever that they can get the point across, and they can look at the map too. But this could be a big problem coming up in about a week, so let's start getting the word out for people down in Mexico. Like I said, it's been a while. I can't remember the last significant hurricane in that region. We've had a heck of a couple years with other things that it escapes me, but this could be that. Okay, this could break that precedent, and we could have some issues here in about a week. All right, so this is interesting as we start to wrap things up. Why don't we have much happening in the Atlantic, even though we kind of do, as we talked about? Well, the MJO is currently not in the Atlantic Basin, that Madden-Julian oscillation, this big magical umbrella, if you will, of favorability, where the air is rising and diverging in the upper atmosphere, lots of moisture, less wind shear, all those favorable things, and we just call it the MJO for short. That is currently present in a phase, as we call it, that is not the Western Hemisphere or Africa. Those are phases 8 and 1, for example. Right now, the MJO, according to the ECMWF anyway, is favoring the maritime continent region, or, if we look at it from the phase perspective, phase 5. Now, it's interesting because it is forecast. Let's highlight this in blue. It is forecast to, if you look at the mean here, kind of propagate around over the next few days. These are dates. So later on in the month, it comes in through the null phase, which is the circle, meaning no discernible MJO activity. And then you could just deduce that it comes over into phase 1. But what I find particularly interesting are the ensemble members here in the overall envelope, suggesting that shape in there, pretty amplified towards phases 8 and 1. So I wouldn't be surprised going forward, knowing how warm the Atlantic is, that we start to see this adjust and more of those little angel hair, little plots that you see, those little golden lines, become more. That's a lot of them already. I think there's going to be more. And I bet that mean forecast there, which is the darker red and the blue, gets adjusted accordingly, and we see a more amplified MJO. That's just my hunch. I could be wrong, but that warm water in the Atlantic just argues for it to sort of like come this way, MJO, and you got a lot of ensemble support there that it'll happen. And these right here, that's a few of them that are pretty amplified out into the future as we get into the later part of October. So maybe by then, all of this starts to really become important. That very warm water relative to average, the La Nina setting up. Hurricane season isn't over until it's over. All right? So don't forget, we are on Twitter at HurricaneTrack right there. And with the recent debacle yesterday with Facebook, oh, can you imagine? I'll say this real quick, not even going to jump on whatever. But our site usually is up. And, once in a while, something will happen. Something won't work. And boy, the panic sets in. I used to have an app. Oh, my goodness. It was called Hurricane Impact. Some of you may have invested in it, and I appreciate that over the years. A few dollars, it helped out. But it's just, that thing would crash, and that gave me such stress. And that was just a few thousand users globally, on a really good day. We had maybe a few thousand users. Can you imagine a platform? And I'm not, again, I'm just saying, billion plus users and everything, Instagram and, the whole Facebook platform, poof, for several hours. I can't even fathom. I mean, I would have died of a heart attack. But anyway, we are on Facebook. CJ manages that for us mostly, and I appreciate that. And in problems notwithstanding with some of the negatives around that, social media can be a good thing, and a lot of it's up to you and who you follow and how you choose to let this affect you. That's the only commentary I will put. And we're on YouTube. This has grown substantially over the last 4 years. Once we started doing YouTube Live, it really, really jumped. In fact, if you didn't know this, I've been on YouTube since 2006, 1 year, roughly, after YouTube even started. They started on Valentine's Day of 2005, I think, if memory serves, and we got on there in 2006. All right, we're also on Patreon, the website and app, where you can crowdfund stuff that's important to you. And we have over 900 people that are saying, yeah, that's important to me. And if you want to join in, you can go to patreon.com/HurricaneTrack. Lots of extras, including exclusive documentaries, podcast series, access to all the live cameras, our interactive map, the interaction with us on the chat. It's pretty darn cool. And you can just aim your camera at that QR code if you want to, and that'll take you directly there. I keep bumping. That's my mic, by the way. I never put it in the shot, but there it is, just out of the frame. I see these other YouTubers where the boom mic is like right there, and it's like, I couldn't do that. That would distract me. So I keep the microphone just out of the camera view, but occasionally my talking hands and I bump it. All right, I'll shut up and post this for you. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. As always, thanks for tuning into the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. I appreciate it. I'm Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. I'll talk to you some more tomorrow.